John Yashewski. I know most of you, I think. Those of you that I don't know, welcome. I've done this a couple of years, maybe 7 or 8 years now. I call it What's Your Campground Worth, but it's really focused on sort of 3 areas. If you're looking to sell, what do I have to do to get my books right as the seller? If you're looking to buy, what do I want to look for in the books? And if you're looking to refinance or maybe leverage some of your park or add cabins or whatever the hottest trend is these days, this should help you. So we'll go from there. Oops. There we go. I always tell you to go with a 3-year plan. I like to say that if you're a campground owner that has all of your money on the books, you will be the first one I've ever met. And it's surprising to some people that they don't understand that the cash that they put in their pocket isn't worth something to the buyer if it's not on your books. So I always tell people when you're getting ready to sell, kind of look at a 3-year cycle, put some on year 1, put more on year 2, and put most of it on year 3. And that way your books look better each year, your buyer knows what they're getting at the end, and the bank is going to be able to loan on that property. I don't know if most of you guys are familiar with the appraisal process, but unless you're coming in with cash, the bank's going to hire an independent appraiser, not somebody that you get to pick, and they're going to say, what's this property worth? And they're going to look at the numbers the same exact way I look at the numbers. Now you'll see some companies that will tell you this multiplier business, I just don't believe in it at all. You have some people that'll say, oh, you just take 3.5 times your gross sales and that's what your park is worth. And I kind of find that hard to believe, and here's a quick example of that. Let's say you got a $100,000 campground, makes $100,000 a year. All seasonals, nothing to do with the campground. You simply let them walk in, they go fishing, and they leave. It costs you 20 grand to have them there. So 80,000 of the 100 drops to the bottom line. At a 3.5 times multiplier, and we'll see that a little bit later, that park's worth $350,000. But if you look at the net operating income at a 10% cap rate, that same property values out at $800,000. Now flip that over, you got $1 million property that brings in $1 million bucks a year, but it's highly, highly intense and employee driven and all that stuff, and it takes $900,000 to make that $1 million. Now at a 3.5 times calculator, that park is supposedly worth 3.5 million, right? And when it's dropping $100,000 to the bottom line at a 10 cap rate, it's worth exactly what it makes, $1 million, right? So to me, that's the fair way to assess, and that's the only way an appraiser is going to assess it. So grabbing a calculator to me is a funny way to get math, and I think most of the time they're looking back at historicals and saying, how do I get to the number I want with a multiplier? So they come up with a multiplier that works out to that number as opposed to using a true multiplier. So some of this stuff I'll breeze through if you're familiar with it, but one of the things I always tell owners is you can't be emotional about the baby that you created. Yep, it's your baby. Yep, you and your mom and your grandpa and grandma built this place and it's 3rd generation campground. So to me, it's worth $1 billion. But to her, it's worth what it's worth, you know, and so you got to learn to pull that emotion out of the sale or even out of the refinance and create a number that's actually going to be usable by the bank and usable by your potential buyer. There are some acceptable methods that people use, and I've, comparing a recent sale from another campground and stuff like that, but again, I stress staying with NOI as a valuation. And we already talked about this stuff, so I'll skip that. I like to go, NOI is the correct way to, in my opinion, to value your property. So you're going to need like 3 different things in your world to start your valuation. One is your financial statements, income statements, cash flow statement, balance sheet. Those are stuff that, bank stuff that nobody likes to talk about. when I get done, we'll grab a spreadsheet and kind of walk through it. But what I really want to help you understand is, let's say I add something to my campground. Does that add value to me? Does it create value? And I'm going to show you how to do that. I showed some folks there yesterday how to do that. And I'm going to skip through this. You guys mostly know what this is. This is a new term for a lot of people, and I want to help you understand. I call it SDE. Other people call it something different. But at the end of the year, or during your year, you might have extra cash that's falling to your bottom line, okay? And you say, geez, the front road needs to be paved, or we need to upgrade more of our 50 amp people to our 30 amp people to 50 amp people, et cetera, et cetera. So you can take what I call seller's discretionary earnings and infuse that into the park, create a value in your park, but don't penalize yourself next year for that expense. Does that make sense? So if you spend 10 grand on a roof on your bathhouse, guess what you're not going to do next year? Spend 10 grand on your roof on your bathhouse, right? So you need to be able to back that out, explain it to your banker, explain it to your buyer, that this was a one-time thing that you're never going to have to do again, at least for the foreseeable future. So you can create that as a, hey, yes, that was an expense this year, but it won't be next year. And here's an example. $70,000 of your earnings was invested to upgrade all your sites to 50 amp service.
So John,
yeah.
Do you think you should make a line item, like just to show that, like when you're...
Exactly. That's exactly what you do. And I'll show you in my spreadsheet. I'll actually give you at the end of this class, if you don't have my business card, grab it, and I will email you a spreadsheet that you can use not just for today or tomorrow, but every single year when you get done with your taxes or when you grab your P&L, you can plug in all your incomes, plug in all your expenses, and it will calculate for you what your park is worth, starting with a basis of 10 cap rate, but then it'll actually show you what your true cap rate is. And it'll show you your EBITDA too. So, and if nobody knows what those are, I'll help you understand that. But see, let's say you made $100,000 of operating income, and you spent 70 of it in your camp doing this, you're only going to show a $30,000 profit. That's going to make you look pretty bleak, right? But truly, you did make 100. And I'll show you some stuff at the end of the day. But SDs really do make any, and I call them non-recurring expenses or seller discretionary earning expenses. They make a big difference to your bottom line. So make sure that you're looking at those big one-time hits and pulling them out of your pro formas. Everybody know what that stands for, EBITDA?
I do.
Do you?
Earnings
Cool.
before interest, taxes,
Right.
depreciation, and
Got it. Bingo. So this number basically is telling you and your banker that if I didn't have a mortgage, what kind of cash flow would I be making? And if I take the depreciation and appreciation and build it all into that number before I pay my taxes and before I pay my interest, what would I be really making? So it gives you a good number to bounce from. So it measures profits without considering other factors such as financing costs, interest, your accounting practices, depreciation and amortization, tax tables. So EBITDA gets the fat out. Cute, right? So here again, I don't like these multipliers, but what if my gross sales don't equal what I want to get for my park, either through a multiplier or through the preferred method of NOI? Again, you've probably heard me say this, but the NOI valuation is over a traditional gross sales multiplier because it's a truer representation of worth. Gross multipliers, as I said, look back at history. NOI looks at your books today and values your park today. What if it's still not what I want? We can use our earnings to increase sales. Here's just a quick example. I can tell you last year at convention, I think I sold 7 cabins for the cabin guys outside that I never met. Okay? Because we sat down with owners, and the owners said, first of all, by a show of hands, who's got cabins at their park? By a show of hands, who's got full cabins every weekend at their park? Okay? by show of hands, who's had to turn people away because their cabins were full? Why the hell don't you have more cabins? Right? And the thing is, you got to look at it like this. Let's say you got 180 bucks a night, and you only rent them for 25 weekends a year for the 2 days, Saturday and or Friday and Saturday. That's 50 nights, right? 50 nights times 180 bucks a night, 9,000 bucks, right? Guess what a $25,000 cabin, 100% financed at the bank, will cost you out of 10-year note? 3,200 bucks. 3,200 bucks. Costs you another 1,350 or so to say, I always say 15% of your gross sales to clean it and maintain your cabin. So now you go from 9,000, pay your mortgage, who somebody else is paying for, pay your cleaning people, and you got $4,500 that drops to the bottom line, which came from who? Your customers. You never paid for it. And guess what the $4,500 does at a 10 cap rate? Times 10, $45,000 year one added to the value of your campground. Year one. Make sense? So to me, it's like a no-brainer when you're, put yourself on the other side of the desk for a little bit and say, yeah, why am I not doing that? And why am I not going to the bank and saying, look, here's what I did the last 3 years in cabin sales. Here's what I did. I want you to just loan me. Most of you have some equity in your property anyway. I want you to loan me the 100% of this at a 10-year fixed rate, decent interest rate, probably 4.5 on a 10-year, maybe 5. Loan me that money, 100%, and somebody else is going to pay for it. Who in here knows there's two kinds of debt. Who in here knows what it is? You learned last night, didn't you?
Good debt and bad debt.
Right, good debt and bad debt. What's good debt? Good debt is when it goes up in value and you're not paying for it. Bad debt goes down in value and you're paying for it.
Must be talking about my boat.
Exactly. You know what BOAT stands for, don't you? Bust out another 1,000. Anyway, all I'm trying to get to here is, guys, I always instruct all of my landlords, I have a lot of rental properties, or campground owners, never, 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 never get bad debt unless you have good debt to pay for it. So if you want to buy a new truck, you better have 3 new cabins that are paying for it. So to me, that's something to remember at all times, good debt versus bad debt, and how do you pay for your bad debt, okay? So, and we know about cabins would everybody say cabins are the new hot thing right now? I mean, if you got one, you need one. What's that?
We added 5 last year.
Did you?
Yeah, it's just, you can't keep them. They're just full.
How many have you added in the last 6 years, Jim? 7. So it's, and you could probably add more.
You can always add more. You have to help to keep.
Yep. And I know that's the part, but with J1 students, there are some opportunities to get fairly inexpensive labor to clean them if you can't do it yourself. But again, I think I'm speaking probably pretty fairly that 15% of your gross revenues should be enough to clean. Would you agree with that? So if you look at it that way and take that to your bank, I can't believe there's a bank in America that would say no to that. Can't believe it. Especially if you show them what you're doing with the current cabins you have. Any questions on that? So for me, this part is real quick and dirty. I just like to tell you about a few of the buzzwords. Most of you didn't go to accounting school, but you might have stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night and played one. But I feel like as soon as you go to the bank and you start talking about, hey, I'm using my discretionary earnings to increase the park's value, that's not going to recur next year. Using words like that to a banker says, holy crap, these guys know what they're talking about. Here's my pro forma. Here's my NOI. Those are great indicators of a person's understanding of value. So just so you guys understand, I want to flip us over to a spreadsheet. Can everybody see this okay? I know it's a little tight. This is the spreadsheet I'll give to anyone who wants it. You plug your name in here, you plug in what you think your purchase price is going to be. In this particular case, these guys make $700,000 a year, if you see it up here. Can everybody see this okay? So, and I just plopped it into a the whole thing as one thing, but you can drop in what your seasonals were, what you made on your store, what you made in your cabins. So this number is comprising all of those things, okay? So you can be very specific so you can actually see, oh wow, my cabins did this much this year. And I always like to divide everything by 12, and I know your season isn't the whole year, okay? But you do have expenses that run all year long. So I try to give you an understanding of, here's kind of what you need from a money standpoint for the calendar, divided by 12, if you will. But then you can kind of build your own spread of, well, July is going to be really high, and this is going to be really, but this at least gives you a good understanding, okay? So if you were to buy this park, let's say you got to put 25% down, okay? I'm going to just go like this. Oops. So there's what most people would have on a 25% loan. Most banks would require you to have 25% down, so they're going to want a pretty good chunk of change, right? So maybe you can't afford all that, so maybe you go on a second mortgage, land contract with your seller. There's very creative ways to do that, but let's just, for example, leave this. Let's just go back to where it was a little more valuable. So you're only putting down that much now, okay? I just want to show you more expenses. So then you plug in what your
25% what? You take off the 1.5.
purchase price, the 1.5 million up here. Okay, so here you plug in your loan, interest rate, years on the loan, and that's your monthly mortgage payment, okay? Here you're plugging in what your taxes are, your insurance is. They plop over here in monthly quarters. Here's your utilities and all your other monthly expenses. Your annual expenses divided by 12, okay? That pops down here. So you're starting with $58,000 a month, roughly, of income and $40,000 monthly in expenses. So then everything extrapolates out from a monthly to a yearly standard. And here comes your expenses, and here's your net operating income. So at a 10 cap rate, this number is times 10. So you see it, I think I bought the park for 1.5 million. I'm telling you it's worth 2.1 right now. Make sense? Based on these sales and these expenses. So when you plug this stuff in, it's going to give you a number immediately on your own park. And it'll be like, oh, that's cool.
Cap, the average.
10 cap is very, very acceptable to nearly every bank I've ever worked with. And I would tell you, specific to campgrounds. And I got to tell you that,
Things different.
yeah, but what I do, what I think is kind of cool is I actually started out on a 10 cap, and then I tell you, here's what it's actually performing at. So everybody understand what capitalization rate is? Very simply put, if you paid $1.5 million for it on a 10 cap rate, that would mean I get 10% of my $1.5 million back in profits, back in earnings each year. So within, whether you spend that money or do something else with it, in 10 years, you're going to get your initial investment back, okay? So this one is saying, hey, I'm going to do it in a lot less because I'm actually performing at 15% a year, which is great, okay? And then this one also, my spreadsheet has two folders. You do have to plug in what you think the land is worth, what the personal property is worth, and then it'll calculate what the buildings and blue sky and goodwill is worth. Okay, all that stuff, if you can look at it, tax codes have changed where you can actually fast depreciate some of your personal property stuff. I tend to think 5 years is the best plan of attack, but for you, in 1 year, you might choose to depreciate the whole thing. But in my example, I'm depreciating this personal property over 5 years, or 20% a year. So the rest of it, you can't depreciate land, of course, but the rest of it is over 27 and a half years. So 100% divided by 27 and a half is 3.64 per year. So that's why you see that number there. So again, as long as you plug in these two numbers, this will calculate and pop over here, and this becomes your total depreciation. So everybody understands what total depreciation is, right? That's money that when the money drops to your bottom line, that you get to scoop off of it before you start paying taxes. Make sense? Now, of course, the government will actually penalize you if you don't depreciate stuff, so you have to. But then when you sell it, you know how it goes. If you bought it for $1 million, you sold it for $2 million, and you depreciated it down to $500,000, you're paying the difference between $500,000 and $2 million in capital gains. So when you sell, you got to look at, can I make my house worth a lot, as much as it possibly can? You know, hopefully $500,000 or close to it if you're married, $250,000 each. But those are the kinds of things you have to watch out for, and that's another reason why I tell people, don't be afraid of taking some of the money in a land contract if you trust the buyer, because then you can defer some of those capital gains.
And suck the interest rate. And get the interest rate off.
Yep, exactly. So that's that, and then down here, you're seeing what your principal reduction is, or your appreciation in the property. Now, the front page assumes a 3% gain each year. That's pretty modest. You're probably going up more than that in your seasonal fees, and you're probably going up maybe a little more than 3% on your overnight sites. And your land is clearly going up in value, and your buildings and stuff are usually going up in value. So, are you coming in here to turn the heat off? I wish.
I had to go out and be cooled off.
If I'd have known I was going to be this thirsty this morning, I'd have drank more last night. So anyway, those are things that you want to, that's all calculating into your EBITDA number, but
Is that why you got a 15% then? It's based off the 3% return?
I'm actually taking this number, which is my actual cash flow. So I built this number based on a 10%.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the original calculation is saying, hey, you can see it's taking that number at a 10% cap rate. But now I'm saying, hey, my income, what is it actually producing at? And it's actually producing at 15%. So I actually took the numbers and said, what did I make versus what I paid for it, and how quickly is that going to pay me down? Make sense? And then, of course, you got your EBITDA. So does that make sense to everybody? So I just wanted to show you, if we add a cabin, now remember what we have here. We have $2.192 million, right? If we add a cabin at $180 a night times 50 nights, okay, divided by 12, we're adding $750 a month for that cabin. And that same cabin is going to cost me at 4.5% for a 10-year straight note, $259 a month.
It's gonna be probably $50,000 cabin instead of $25,000.
Exactly. That's my point. It's literally like you're doubling the value of the cabin, as soon as you bring it on property. Literally. And as soon as that happens, you went from 219 to 282, almost 90 grand. You know, of course, we got to put in the cleaning, the 15% cleaning fee, but you get my point? It's such a value add to your business that any bank is going to look at that and say, of course I'll loan you that money. Especially when, like I say, when you show them, hey, here's what I've done in the last 2 years or 3 years with my current cabins. And here's the reservations I've been turning away.
How close is the banker's appraisal coming out to your spreadsheet appraisal?
That's what I'm wondering. So can I?
Because
I'll-
they're going to
yeah,
find
yeah.
comps and everything else.
I'll give you, here, first of all, I want to just throw this up here. These are the 3 acceptable approaches for valuing a property. Cost approach, in other words, how much would it cost me to buy the land and develop a campground right here? Okay? And I would tell you that in 99% of the cases, that's the most expensive approach. Most expensive. Income approach is doing what we're talking about, the NOI. And I'll tell you right now, 100% of the appraisers, and maybe that's what you're going to tell me.
20 grand.
Yeah.
We just bought at the end of last season.
And I got to be real honest with you about appraisers, okay? The thing about appraisers is they will never, if I'm buying your campground for $800,000, and we both know it's worth $2.1 million, but you're selling it to me for $800,000. I guarantee you that appraiser is going to come in and say, I'm going to find 3 campgrounds that I can say your campground is worth about the same as, and your appraisal will come in about 840.
Right, it's gonna be really close.
Yep. And then the next day, I could have the same exact appraiser come in, hire him myself, and say, now tell me what it's really worth.
So
And it'd be $2 million.
there's a campground owner here right now I was talking to, and he went in to do some bank work and had an appraisal done at the bank, and it came in 300,000 less than what he wanted. Went to another bank, the exact same appraiser, gave him, it was 900 that he was looking for, gave him that appraisal. How does that work?
I'll tell you how it works. I'll tell you how it works.
Different bank.
These appraisers are independent contractors, okay? And they are, it's kind of like a speed trap. How many of you know we're not to speed in your town? Everybody, right? The cop's always sitting in this spot, right? So appraiser's kind of the same way. They're looking at the guys in underwriting and saying, are they going to be crawling up my butt if I appraise this wrong? And can you imagine the red flags that go booming off if he says, it's worth $2 million, but they're only buying it for $800,000? Collusion, there's something's going on, and some money's changing hands under the table. That's exactly what happens when there's that big of drastic of a difference. So they literally will find a different comparable that matches what we want to go after.
To make the bank happy, or, I mean, I just didn't understand, it was like 2 different banks.
I mean, there's some times where they just can't.
But $3,000 per $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So when you buy a house, there can't be any interaction anymore. You know,
Right,
Is that a little different with commercial property?
Commercial property, the bank can actually still pick their appraiser. Some of them are getting a little more fussy about it, but commercial, there's like 5 in a circle and it randomly generates. Okay, it's your turn. You got it. Yep. But again, I'm not trying to say appraisers are not doing their job. Most of them will adequately appraise your property. And I tell you, they're looking at my spreadsheet and they're saying, that's exactly how I'm going to appraise it. Exactly. And the bank is going to look at it, put it into their own algorithm, into their own spreadsheets, and pretty much cough out the same number.
Does the bank look up for a specific approach one over another?
The bank only cares about income. Only cares about income, period. Because if you can't make your money, you can't make your mortgage.
But what if they take, okay, so if the bank only cares about income, in the case of real estate is kind of involved in a campground sale. It's not, it's not like you're buying a business strictly, you're actually buying real estate too.
Yes, yeah, but
So they won't value 2 aspects of it, they kind of consider both.
kind of look at it like this.
Income has to pay for the asset.
Yeah, look at it like this. Let's say you buy a campground, and there's a beautiful $400,000 house on that campground, and that campground owner lives in that house, right? If the campground doesn't make enough money to pay for the business and the house, what bank's going to think that you're going to go work at McDonald's on the weekend to pay your mortgage on your house? No one. So it needs to, unfortunately, all blend together and still create a profit for you to live on and pay your mortgage. Now there are people that can get creative on this and make part of the loan, like say $400,000 of it, on 4% over 30 years, because that's your house. And then you take that $400,000 out of here, see what I'm saying? So it actually reduces your payment a little bit. It was 8,000 something, if I remember right. So there's creative ways to. Oh, it's 10,000. Oh no, wait. Yeah, 8,300, and it was 70, whatever it was. But so it reduces it $400 or $500 a month by taking your house out on a longer note, because it's, it's a residential property. Any other questions on that stuff?
Do you recommend keeping your house separate from the business? So at time of sale, you don't have to pay the depreciation. the capital gains and everything else, then you can sell it tax.
The capital gains on your house, if you lived there 3 of the last 5 years, you get to take the exemption whether it's part of the campground or not.
Even if you're using depreciations on it, like writing stuff off that's part of the business.
Well, like if you have your office in the house or something, then that square footage gets depreciated typically. I guess I wouldn't want to give you bad advice on that, but I think
They
talk to
change some of that throughout the
talk to your accountant and make sure. But I think
I handled that. When we sold our house, our business ran out of it, and they whacked the hell out of us because
yeah.
it was, our office space was.
Our shop was there and everything else.
Yeah, that's here.
Any other real world questions that people want to throw at me? Yeah.
Go back to when if they don't have the money for the down payment, so you kind of figure you're gonna end up with skin in the game.
Yep.
How does the bank look at that? I mean, they're gonna borrow you X number of dollars, and you're gonna be able to afford the payment. But how are they gonna justify being able to add the payment to get the skin in the game back?
You actually just hit it right on the head. The bank wants the buyer to have skin in the game. So zero down is never going to happen. Never. You know, let's just, for example, let's say it's $1 million park, and let's say you're going to loan him $500,000, and he's going to go to the bank and try to get the other $5, and you're willing to be in second position. The bank will never take anything but first position in the mortgage. Okay, you're willing to be in second position, and you love the guy and you know him. He's worked you for years. There's no issue. You might get your local bank, local guy that knows you and maybe knows him to bite on that, but no one else would. No one else would. They want him to suffer if he walks away. So to try to convince him not to walk away, if that makes sense to you. So even if the guy had 100,000 or 50,000 in a game, you carried back 450, the bank took 500, they might consider that. But they want you to think twice about saying, you know what, I'm done with this. It didn't cost me nothing. I made a couple bucks this year, and I don't want to play anymore. You know, I don't like the campground. These people are jerks. You know? So that's the real issue, I think, is you want people to.
One question about, going back to the value of your campground and having somebody come in and evaluate it, or going to the bank and trying to get money. What else, starting a new one? You have nothing existing. How do you create value on something like that? You don't know if that campground's gonna fill up. You don't know if, you know what I mean, to set your rates, to put it, to build something brand new, to get an evaluation.
How many of you have the only campground in your state? How many of you have the only campground in your county? How many of you have the only campground in your town? You know, I guess my point is, there's usually enough around you to pick up historicals to at least get a good start. I got to be honest with you. If you as a buyer came to me and said, I want to build a campground, I'd say, the quickest way to make a small fortune in building a campground, start out with a large fortune. Because you're not going to, it's so labor intensive and money intensive to start up a property, and then it takes 3 years or so to get people to come. It's far better, in my opinion, and there's some folks in here I know that have bought more than one park. I know Mike and Jim have purchased more than one park in their day. Far better to buy a park, whether it's depressed or not, and rebuild it, retool it, reinvent it, than it is to start from scratch. Would you guys agree? Yeah, so to me, I would just say, it's too hard. And the other thing is, like, you look at the DNR and what the DNR's done in our area. There's parts of almost every river you can't build on. Parts of every lake you can't build on. So to duplicate the one that's for sale on that beautiful lake is impossible. You can't go to the field a mile from there and say, well, I'll build it and they'll just move over here. No, they won't. They're going to be by the lake. You get what I'm saying? So, part of that is there's only so many pieces of cool property left that you can turn over and resell and retool as a campground.
So how does expansion fit into
Well, to me, expansions, if you've got the land and you've got the customers, and most of you I would think do, you're crazy not to expand. At least some every year. You know, if you've got the land and you're full, I mean, it's like printing your own money. And it doesn't, you know, adding, literally, but it's like if you add 10 sites to your property, does that add a significantly more amount of work to you? It doesn't. But it's sure adding a significant amount of income.
But if you double in size, you're talking about doubling your mortgage, and now you're gonna go to the bank.
But there again, I think if your books show, look at how I'm doing, and look at the people I'm turning away because I don't have enough sites for them. I don't think a bank's going to be afraid of you, especially if you've got, you know, you're only in your second year, but if you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 years under your belt of steady, consistent increases in seasonal rates and overnight rates, and people coming in and your occupancy rate keeps going up, those are things that, you know, really improve your look to a bank. Right? Right? The other thing a lot of people talk about is weekdays versus weekends. You know, that's the easiest way to increase your money is figure out a way to rent those sites during the week. You know, they're already there. I mean, I know.
I've got a question as a
Sure.
fairly new owner. I'm picking up a resistance to renting out weekly only in a park. Is that just, well, you know, sometimes you'll have people call and say that, you don't know if they're actually true or not. But is anybody here with resistance to doing weekly or monthly because of that? We do have to close down, you know, in the winter. But that's what some of the calls are like, a lot of people don't want to do it. And I'm thinking, who are you talking to?
Make tons of money. Weekly, monthly.
We went new to the state, so we're not sure if there was,
Right.
or if anybody did it.
You can rent.
Every day you can
Please
rent,
don't,
you're right.
because, right.
Well, just-
They're not troublemakers. I think they're thinking that they are full-time, you know, people not qualified to live in a place. You know, I always have a very nice way of, you know, what are you coming through for? Is this vacation? You know, just to see
Right.
what the type of renter they are, but.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, when I was new, I would take monthlies. A lot of them were contractors who were working in the Dells. And then as we became fuller and fuller, we didn't want them because we don't want people living there.
Yep.
You know, and if they're living there, and, you know, and they were blocking other sites, and you just at some point you don't need them. In the early days, yeah, they were great, but you know, we turn them away. We'll do a weekly. We've got a great weekly rate. Pay for 5, get 2 nights free, and we'll tell them if you want to stay for a month, pay the weekly rate. But we won't rent for a month. And, you know, most people won't do the weekly rate because it's too expensive.
Right.
Instead, but you know, again, in the early days, we took it.
And just remember, the luxury of being successful is that you can be picky. You know, and go ahead.
One of the things we found out with having that weekly or monthly people that came in, they usually ended up being a seasonal. They wanted to try your campground out. Even though they only camped on the weekend, they got to drive in with their bag of groceries, go camping, jump in the pool, do whatever they needed to do, and then go home with just their clothes. And the following year, they usually became a seasonal. I mean, it's been pretty cool.
Monthly is more money than a weekender, so if
And
you're missing during the week.
We charge a premium price for it, and they still only use it 2 days
Make
a
a
week.
few of them
You know,
monthly, yes. Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure nobody was scared of monthly.
Do you post your monthly rates on your website against your daily rates? Because I'm getting people that are taking quite a few weeks or two and say, well, I can take it for the whole month. So pretty soon they bought a month and they want to fill in. So I'm getting the point, I don't want to list the rate. I'll say if there's monthly.
I think that's basically really up to you in terms of how full are you, and are you giving up one for another? You know what I mean? If you're giving up good money for bad money, then no. But the other thing I would just stress, if you haven't worked with Mark, our Waco attorney, make sure you do. Especially if you're talking about these monthly leases, I heard you say. Don't ever say leases. Don't, you know, always contracts. Yeah. But just make sure that protecting yourself so that even if they did sign up for a whole month and they're trouble or they're, like Jim said, maybe not the desired client that you want, that all the rest of your clients want there, you can say, look, it's not working out. You got to pack up. Here's your refund, go.
And the way the agreement is written.
Yep.
Is pretty much written, and I always use the term, it's written by me, for a reason. The people that are there that get along don't mind it. The people that are getting booted out, they want to fight it, but it's almost to the point where if I don't like the color of your hair.
Well, Kara and I had a conversation before this meeting, and she brought up a good point. She had a very good seasonal person that has been a model seasonal, okay, that didn't want to sign the seasonal agreement. I don't like this. I want you to take this out. And they had a clever way of explaining. He said, hey, this isn't for you. We love you. You've been great. This is our first year, but you've been great. But this will allow me to kick the guy out next to you that's creating all the problems. And if
dog shitting all over
right.
the neighbor's yard, you don't have a dog, it doesn't really apply to you anyway.
Right. But my point is, the clever way to say it is turn it around and make them feel like they're the good one and say, look, don't you want me to be able to get rid of him if he's a problem for you? So then all of a sudden there's really no complaint.
Oh, it's
You know-
called a license. That's what I've been told by Mark. It's not a contract, it's a
Right.
license.
Which can be revoked.
Limits on the time they should be there, and the seasonals that have been there, all of a sudden, well, it should be from the 1st of January to December.
Right.
But I have to tell them, you can inspect your property, but you can't technically be there.
Now I want to pull back to more of what we're talking about here because I just want to make sure that everyone who isn't comfortable with working with their own numbers gets comfortable. And I think the spreadsheet will help you to analyze your park. And I would suggest to you, again, this isn't so much for you selling the property or being prepared to sell your property as it is an annual tool for you to say, how did we do this year? And now what's my park worth?
Are you gonna give us a link or?
Yeah, if you just email me, you should have my card. And if you shoot me an email saying, hey, I'd like to get your spreadsheet, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
And all I ask is that you don't share it with anybody else. It's something that I worked on for 15 years. So, and I think it's a valuable tool for you guys to use it on your own. So,
Have you run into many situations where the campground will lease the land from?
yeah, quite frankly, that's the best way to do it. And let me explain why. If you look at this side of the spreadsheet, okay? See down here where it says, I'm assuming you're in a 28% tax bracket. See your accountant? So that means I'm going to have to pay $27,000 on the income that I made here. But now, watch what happens. See that? It went to $14,000 of taxes versus 27. Why is it 15? There's two things called active and passive landlords. Okay? If I manage your property for you, you are a passive landlord. And then all the income that you make off that passive landlord money gets put onto your tax return in your current tax bracket. If you become an active landlord, you negotiate the lease with the customer, and the customer could be you, because you're leasing to yourself. You know, in our case, it's going to be you. Okay, you're leasing to yourself. But if you become an active landlord, the flat tax rate is 15% on all that rent income. So basically, what I tell people is to slide all of your property income from your property over to rent at the end of the year. And anyone who does this, banks included, will know that you're doing that for a very specific reason.
How many people sell their campgrounds and have prepared for 3 years?
Shockingly, it's always the ones that have a very thick wallet and a very thin P&L. And so I guess all I'm telling you is when I have that hard conversation with you and say, yeah, I know your park's worth $1 million, but on paper it's worth 500. And we got some talking to do. And here's what I would suggest you do. And I've actually waited 3 years for people to say, okay, now I'm ready. I did what you told me to do. Now I'm ready. Or even a year, you know, where they call me early in the season, get it all through this season, and then next season they say, Well, here we are. We got our numbers way up where they belong.
Depends on how much you're pocketing.
That's exactly right.
If you're just pocketing your laundry money, you know, okay, but if
I would think you have to be really careful.
How many of you guys have bars in your campground? How many of you have gambling machines in your campground? Okay. I'll be shocked if all of you are putting that money on your P&L, but if you are, good for you. But if you aren't and you're getting ready to sell in the future, that's one easy one, because that's usually probably an average of, I'm guessing, 30 grand a summer. Your take. So again, just there's little ways to improve your bottom line, but all I want to try to really help you with today is to be able to say, hey banker, I know what my EBITDA value is, I know what my NOI is, here's what I'm doing, and I used some seller discretionary earnings last year, and here's what I did. I put $10,000 on a new paved road into the campground. People love it. I put $7,000 on a roof on my bathhouse. I put $50,000 in electrical updates. Now all of my seasonal sites are going to be much happier, and I'm raising the rates because of it. So all those things you can back out of your expense side and say, with those backed out, look what I've got now for a real value on my campground. And the bank will applaud you for that. So any of you, and I stress this truly, I never sleep. I sleep 3 hours a night max since I was 10 years old. And I sleep 20 to 30 minutes at a time. If you have a crazy idea and email me at 2 in the morning, I bet you at 2:15 I'll answer you. So please feel free to email me or call me. My cell phone's on my card. I'd be happy to walk through a spreadsheet with you. If you got it plugged in and you don't quite get it or you made a mistake on it, send it over to me. I'll fix it. I will never share your numbers with anyone. I'll delete it if you want me to the second I get it. But I'm happy to go through it with you and try to help you get your park where you want it to be.
Have you dealt with it? So when we bought the campground in 14, it was pretty ran down. Every year I ask them to come back. Every year I say, come see what we've done. Go through the park, you take them through the whole park, show them everything we're spending money, everywhere we're putting in. And every year he's like, can't believe we did this much this year. Every year. Do you think at the end when we decided to sell this campground, that bank would be more likely to lend back to somebody?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I'll tell you, even without that step, which is a really cool step and a good idea, I'll tell you that most banks, here's the dirty little secret about banks, okay? Banks can loan up to the value of the property they're holding. Okay, so they're just like us, we have customers. They have shareholders, stockholders to be responsible to. So when you get your business, let's say you, because I don't want to talk real numbers, but let's say you bought it for $1 million. And let's say now because of all the things you've done to it, it's worth $2 million. Okay? You've also been paying that note down, that $1 million note down. To the bank, that is an asset they absolutely do not want to lose. So when it comes time to refinance, make sure you're pushing your bank to say, I want a good rate, I'm going to shop. Because if you've got, for example, let's say you paid it down to $750, started at $1 million, paid it down to $750, and now it's worth $2 million. They are allowed to borrow against that equity in their bank to other people. Okay? And so it doesn't mean that your debt is in any way in jeopardy, but it means that they have this global vision of their bank debt to equity ratio that they can loan against.
You're a good tool for them.
Right. So you're a very powerful tool, and if you go away, their borrowing power goes away, and that's the only way they make money.
How often are they adjusting the value of your property on their end, if you're not going to them yearly to say, come look at my property?
That's why they ask for your taxes every year.
That's what they're
You give
using.
them taxes.
Yep, they're doing
So
that.
you could actually have them come through and actually find
We
it,
did
they'll
it
find
after
it more
2
valuable.
years.
Yes,
We did it
yes,
after the appraisal.
for sure. But more importantly than anything, it's a great tool for you to know that you can put the screws to them, interest rate wise, if you have a very, very good portfolio. Does that make sense to you? So don't forget that part. And then the other part is when it comes time to sell, and say you want the $2 million, we only got a couple minutes left, but say you want the $2 million, they're going to be pretty elated to loan on that because they know that you can make money at it. They've seen it year on year on year on year. Now, of course, they're going to have a different debt structure, but they know that their money can be made there. Make sense?
You find many banks will let you lock in for more than 5 years?
You know, I work really hard to find those banks, but most banks on a commercial loan want to start at 3. You can almost always get them to extend to 5. There's a few that you can get to go to 7, and I've found about 6 or 7 that will actually lock in for 10 years on a 20-year AM. It's a little bit higher rate at the front, but boy, does it protect you for those first 10 years. And once you get to those 10 years again, guess who's got the power when you're negotiating the redo on that loan? You do, because you paid down so much. So I would really struggle if you don't get at least 7 years, come talk to me, and I'll try to find you a bank that will go that long. A lot of the Huntington Bank and some of those other banks that are regional but good sized are even working with folks to do SBA loans. And those you can sometimes get locked in at as far as 25 years.
Yeah, we got 20 in ours.
Fixed.
In the cabins, I tell you straight out, any single cabin you buy, do not pay a dime down on it. If you've got the people to rent them, let the bank carry that 10 years. It makes no sense to use your money there. Use your money someplace else. Good debt versus bad debt. Remember that? Any other questions for me?
Quick synopsis on the buyers out there?
Pardon me?
From the realtor.
What's that?
Quick synopsis on the buyers.
I actually, right now, this very minute, am working with probably 70 people that are actively looking for campgrounds. It's crazy right now. I wish I had 20 more campgrounds to sell them. Yeah, I really do, because there's a lot of people out there that love this industry. Any other questions? Thank you so much. If you'd please fill out an evaluation for me, I really appreciate it.